So we wanted to talk, or we brought up a little bit about Omni. As I mentioned, you guys saw Cody Hill talk a little bit about this at Tech Field Day in Austin. What I wanted to show you first and foremost is Platform 9, first and foremost, eats its own dog food. We talk about having a private cloud, a public cloud, and Kubernetes all tied together. This is actually what we call our dog food environment, where we're live building and maintaining and developing Platform 9 itself. And as you see today, we have multiple AWS regions. We have multiple physical data center regions. These are actually in our colo in Milpitas. And we have a mix of both KVM and VMware from a hardware perspective. So if we went and took a look at this infrastructure, this is pure AWS here. But if we flip over into a vSphere environment and take a look at the infrastructure here, you'll see that we're talking about actual clusters and the data stores underneath them at a VMware layer. And really starting to tie all of this together is where we get into that hybrid cloud mindset and giving you that single pane of glass to both manage the governance as well as be able to tally up everything that you have out there day to day. So as I mentioned, Cody was here to talk about AWS. And that was kind of Omni on the big stage at OpenStack Summit Barcelona. Big bang, hey, you can now provision into AWS with OpenStack APIs. We're here today to tell you we're taking it a step further, and we're going to continue to take it a step further after that. Whoops, let's go to the next tab. What I have here today is the next release of Omni targeting Google Cloud. So what we have is a Platform 9 Clarity UI tied specifically to a Google Cloud or a Google Cloud Engine, Compute Engine instance. So this is our backend Google Compute, and you can see we have our instances, et cetera. We have, there we go, networking, concepts of VPCs. A lot of what we saw in Amazon exists in Google Cloud. Go figure, it's a public cloud. It's something that has a lot of the resources developers want to consume. What I'm going to show you today is how we start to flip through those. And I'm going to flip back to the Compute Engine tab. And let's go ahead and go to our Instances tab here. And what we'll see is I already have an instance out here. We can see that the name on the host starts with a 24BD3. If I flip back to that Google Compute Engine, we see right here I have my instance 24BD3. This is something I deployed earlier. You can see it's leveraging some CPU. It's been out there for a while. So we have something that exists. We know we can provision. But how does that actually work? With Platform 9, what we're going to do is tie and set you up with the global external network, just like we did in AWS. This is the floating IP or the elastic IP space for Google Cloud, so that when you go and provision and need to make your instances publicly available, you're going to pull right from those Google subnets. But everything else, we're going to leave up to you. You're going to be able to use the OpenStack APIs and Platform 9 Clarity UI to call those APIs and drive that provisioning right into the Google Cloud. So I'm going to go ahead and create a network here, and we're going to call it CFD demo. And we're going to give it a quick subnet name of subnet. We could type CFD demo and give it a little network CIDR. Like I said, I came from GE. I'm a little used to the 3-dot space. So if you guys will live with my 3-dot VPC, we'll go ahead and get this configured. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a nice little subnet pool, leaving the first few addresses free just so that GCP can leverage it. And I don't need to use all of them, so let's not be greedy, and let's go ahead and only use the first 40 IP addresses or so. Since we're with Google, why not leverage the Google public DNS? There we go.
What happens if you don't leave enough addresses in there for Google Compute?
So you're going to have some issues with your public gateway. So your networks are going to have routability issues.
If I put that in there, is that going to warn me?
So it will not warn you specifically today, no.
It would fail if I tried to deploy it that way?
Correct.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and create that network. And while that's actually creating, let's flip back over and go to our quick little VPC networks. And what we see is there are a bunch of networks out there. My account's only authorized for so many of these. But if we take a look here and add the OpenStack ID, so we can see what we're working with, we have a 8AC89 network. So if we want to flip over to networking, we're going to find my 8AC. Looks like we're not quite provisioned yet. So we'll go ahead and give that a few minutes. But while that's finishing and we double check back here, I have a private VPC. I have my public internet. What I need to do in the meantime is tie those two together. So I need, in OpenStack terms, to create a router. So I'm going to go ahead and create my CFD router and attach it to that global network externally. And then I'm going to attach it to my internal tenant network and go ahead and just create a router and have it assume its default gateway. So I've now stitched those tenant networks together, that tenant and external network together. And the next thing I want to go ahead and do is build that instance. So I have my one instance running already, but I need to go build something else. So let's do a quick Ubuntu build. And we'll just give it we don't need anything large, just give it a nice little sample here. But what you can see is we've discovered all of the flavors that exist out there in GCP. We know what they allow to be built. So I'm going to choose one of those. I'm going to build on my CFD demo network. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a nice name of CFD demo instance. I'll tie my SSH key that I uploaded earlier to it. And let's go ahead and allow all traffic, which is just a default security group that I created, which is going to allow my virtual machine to authenticate in and out. I'm going to go ahead and use Cloud Init here and use a very sample explanation. And essentially what we're going to do here is set a password, set the password to never expire, allow me to SSH in with a password. Even though I have my key, I'll have that option. But I'm going to run a command here where I'm going to echo hello world from pf9 into the temp directory in pf9.txt, just to show that we can actually customize those machines a little bit. So let's go ahead and create that instance, kick it off out there, and we can see it's out and creating in the wild. Oh, looks like we had a nice little error. And of course, that's the benefit of live demos. So let's try and create this again with the network I had pre-created before, just to go ahead and push that through. And throw my SSH key in one more time. And let's go ahead and build. All right, that looks a little better so far. So while we're waiting for that to build, essentially what we're doing here is we're showing integration with both the VPC concept in Google Compute, the Google Compute Engine concept, as well as we have the capability to integrate with block storage engines. Oh boy. Well, as we can see, as I was testing earlier today, I was able to provision one. So that's always a fun little experiment to run into. So we're going to have to do some troubleshooting there. But in the meantime, what I can do is go ahead and take this little floating IP that exists in, hold on here, click is a little off, but there we go. And show that we can actually SSH into this based on the details I created earlier. What we want to show you guys is just the concept of really starting to stretch that concept of AWS, GCP, Azure coming down the line, being able to control across those multiple clouds, and really work to tie all of those together with a single API that's writing your code once, running it in any single cloud, and treating those as just another separate region that you're working in.
So is this providing an OpenStack API compatible abstraction layer across Amazon, now Google, and in the future Azure?
Absolutely. And just one of the ways we're going to show that is all of your API endpoints are provided in a way that people are used to seeing and services people are used to seeing with those OpenStack endpoints. So you have the concept of your glance image API endpoint for your Google Images. You have your Nova endpoint for your GCP compute engine. You have your Cinder endpoint for the block storage, and you have your Neutron endpoint for the VPC concept. So tying all of these together and moving into the public cloud space without having to rewrite everything that you've done.
Do you think enough of your customers have taken on OpenStack? Because it was going to be the savior and was going to be the Linux of public cloud. That has somewhat faltered. I know huge service providers are doing amazing, huge things with it, but it hasn't quite caught on as people were expected with the enterprise. Kubernetes may fill that gap, but do you see enough use by enterprises that they actually want to have OpenStack access as their de facto IaaS API?
So we actually do. And the reason I'm going to say this is I'm going to change your question just a little bit. The reason OpenStack tended to struggle in those environments was more of a supportability issue. And what Platform9 is really here to do is to change the concept of that supportability by separating that cloud control plane and that data plane and offering that as a managed service where we take care of the uptime, the SLA around those endpoints, the buildability. Our customers don't have to build up those operational teams to support OpenStack and really figure out and tie all of those elements together in the giant OpenStack Swiss Army knife of the OpenStack environment. We do that for them, and we see that has become a much more successful model. If any of you were at the OpenStack Summit in Boston, you noticed that OpenStack came out with a new delivery model that they trumpeted, and Platform9 was first and foremost in providing that, and that's the remotely managed concept of OpenStack.
Right, but to Julian's point, if your customers haven't already gone through all the pain that they've have had to do to run OpenStack, they wouldn't have been using the APIs, so they're not already accustomed with them.
True.
To transfer over to Platform9.
Yeah, so with the API concept, those customers may be in one public cloud today or working to get into another public cloud. And what we see at that point is we have the capability to come in and say, listen, you're going to write another set of DevOps code to provision to your next cloud and the next cloud after that. We're here to tell you that we can let you do that once, and we're going to continue to support and adjust as public clouds grow.
So the pitch is, you haven't done any OpenStack yet, but you want to use multiple clouds. You don't want to reinvent the wheel 3 times, so you may as well use OpenStack, which is an open source, publicly available API. It doesn't lock you in from an API perspective to Platform9 or any other company, but we will look after it and hold your hand, and you would have a good future with it.
So a question on that, because we were speaking with Scala yesterday, and they chose to go S3 as a de facto standard because pretty much everybody has kind of said S3 is the one that is being used the most often. Have you looked at what developers are targeting as an API, as distinct from operational support? I understand that part. It's because they're one of the constituent groups that you're going to have to deal with. Are they keen on the OpenStack APIs as compared to, for example, AWS?
Yeah, so developers in the long run are flexible as long as they have a dial tone that they can call and receive a footprint back, is what we've seen in the past. And the reason that AWS had such growth with the development community is I didn't have to go sit and wait for my IT team to provide me a server internally. I could lay down a credit card, have that API access in the end. So we see developers that are familiar with it, but what they really care about is that there is an API that they can call.
Okay. Extending my question a little bit, because there are multiple clouds and they will pitch to that. Like, for example, Microsoft has Azure and they have a strong developer-centric view of the world. So they will definitely be pushing their particular platform with Azure Stack. Will you be looking at extending, so rather than having, if you write OpenStack APIs, we can then provide you cross-cloud stuff. Are you looking at extending it to being able to support multiple APIs simultaneously?
That's not something we've discussed today. What we are committed to is providing top-tier open source API frameworks, cloud frameworks. So if other frameworks come, we're going to talk about Fission in the serverless revolution here at the end. Okay. If there's another serverless platform that's open source that starts to gain traction, that's something that we can talk about supporting because we're a plug-and-play type of framework.
But the important thing to Jeremy's point is we are and we want to support open source. And that's in the interest of both customers as well as us. You don't want to be logged into one vendor because ultimately, as we all know, things would become equal, and they're already at that point of time. I'm pretty sure you use AWS or Azure. There's not a whole lot of difference unless you're using some of those specific services. So from that perspective, having an open API is in the best interest of all of us to make sure we don't lock in into one of them. You can move around, and as Pound will show, you can actually move around, and we are going to demo that in the next section.
I think what a lot of these questions are really leading to is we're here to support every step of the way, but how does hybrid cloud really start to change mindsets and change enterprises and allow us to shift workloads wherever we want in a much more seamless fashion? And I think what makes the most sense is to bring Pavan up here next to start talking about Kubernetes and some of the concepts that are contained within Kubernetes and how Platform 9 presents those to really take your hybrid cloud journey to that next level.